Washington Square On Air is the audio town square for the Washington Square Review, Lansing Community College's literary journal. Writers, readers, scholars, publishing professionals, citizens of the world gather here and chat about all things writing. Hey there, this is Melissa Ford Lucken, editor for the Washington Square Review. I'm here today with Sarah Boland, whose poem, Joan of Arc, is going to be included in our summer issue. Hey there, Sarah.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Tell us about your poem. How did you come to write it?
I came to write it just one night. There were a few sort of inspirations for it. I would say, of course, the story of Joan of Arc, which I was always so interested in as a Catholic child. But I really wrote it as sort of a metaphor for like the female experience, I would say, after reading about how Joan of Arc was sort of reburnt when she was murdered 3 times. I found that very interesting since I thought she was a witch. And I just found that so indicative of what being a woman like today is. And
wait. Let me hit rewind and go back to you said that you were intrigued by her story as from a childhood. Mm-hmm. So tell us how, because it sounds like maybe the story changed meaning for you over time, and I'm really interested to hear about that.
Yeah. So like I found like when I was a kid, I just thought she was very, she was the only real female sort of saint-like individual that we looked at in my class. And I always found that interesting that there wasn't more and that she was sort of the only one that was mentioned. And she was mentioned as this very sort of brave, almost masculine figure, even though she was the only woman that was mentioned at all. So I found that super interesting. And then sort of thinking about maybe what she would have been like as a real person and versus how the sort of men that have portrayed her over time, how that has sort of changed what she really was like, and that they sort of got, the people that killed her sort of got to decide what her story was and what that story was portrayed as. I think that's sort of what I was inspired by.
For anyone who doesn't know the story of Joan of Arc, can you give us the little shorthand version?
I mean, I'm not an expert at all.
From your childhood memory, that's fine.
Memory. Just sort of that she was this sort of like female warrior. And she ended up being murdered very young at like 22, 23. And she wanted to just fight with, fight for herself, fight for her country. And as a soldier. And so she's portrayed as this very brave figurehead because she was a woman that wanted to fight and not do the typical sort of woman things, I guess. But yeah.
Those typical woman things, those require bravery too, I just want to say.
Exactly. But apparently the Bible doesn't think about that either. But yeah, so I just thought it was so interesting that this was sort of the only sort of brave person that they mention as brave from the Bible, as a not from the Bible, but just in Catholicism in general, that Mary wasn't brave, and that every other that even every single other woman in the Bible was not portrayed as brave because she did not portray male characteristics. I just thought that was ridiculous, even as a child, being raised by a feminist mother and everything. I just thought it was I instantly didn't like it very much.
It's a very limited view of bravery.
Exactly. That's the only thing that is brave is like dying for country, even though she was not exactly kindly killed in battle, but
and how was she killed?
She was burned at the stake. So so not even did she receive a soldier's death, but I don't remember learning that in primary school. So elementary school. So yeah, I just found that super intriguing, and that's why I was inspired to write the poem. Yeah,
because it sounds like you heard about it as a kid. It lingered in the back of your mind, and I wonder if it was because there were these unanswered questions. Yeah.
Like I think
your mind was obviously still stewing on it, and maybe it was that issue of the bravery and it being so limited. And because you mentioned other biblical women, that
Mhm.
to us expressed bravery just, without a sword.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, since I was always a very feminine child growing up, I thought, does that mean I can't be brave because I don't want to go to war and do these things? But no, it does not mean that. And yeah, I think that majority of women are forced to become brave due to since like as an Australian, I was inspired by the current situation that's not very publicized uh, internationally, I'm guessing. But like last year, 74 women were murdered in Australia at the hands of domestic violence. So I think things like that are just so undermentioned in the bravery that takes to face men in general and men in the home. Um, I think that that's just a very poignant topic globally, and obviously in America as well. But from my personal context, I think that really inspired sort of the anger behind the poem as well, because I think it is quite angry in its language at times. But yeah.
That's the thing about poetry is they can express those emotions intently,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know if I could have written like a short story and gotten the same sort of release that this gave me. Yeah, for sure.
When you were writing it, what other inspirations did you have aside from Joan of Arc? Because you mentioned the female experience, and so I was wondering, did it kind of blend in with the domestic violence piece?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I would just say, like, even current sort of internet debates that seem like silly at the moment, but are very sort of heart wrenching to see. Like, have you seen the whole would I choose a man or a bear if I was stuck in the forest?
Yep.
Yeah. So like that came out after I wrote this poem, but like it's things like that you sort of see and think, oh yeah, like that's so sad, but it is true. It is very true. And I think that, most women are very silent because it's much easier not to think about it, not to think that, there's sort of this inequality at every stage. I just think that as someone who, just studies a lot of feminism and I struggle with male behavior very often, I think that every time I sort of interacted with a man is another inspiration into making sort of angry commentary about it.
Well, you mentioned would you rather, if I remember correctly, the question is, would you rather go into the woods with a man that you don't know or a bear?
Yes.
And so the trend was a lot of women were picking bears. I'd rather go into the woods with a bear. And
yes.
So it ended, if I understand it correctly, it kind of got into kind of a joke. And then at some point somebody asked someone, what about your daughter? Would you rather your daughter went with a man she didn't know or a bear? And he's like, oh, I see what you mean. A bear. But so what I'm thinking about what you're saying is that even something like this that really could spark a conversation, a real conversation, ends up just spinning off into this joke about I'd rather, be with a bear. Ha ha. And so it doesn't go any further than that. So in a place where a conversation could happen that could be lingering and meaningful, it ends up just turning into a goofy thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, it really does. It just keeps happening again and again. Like you say, I feel like most of women's issues are turned into, sort of dramatic jokes and overreactions. And I think, yeah, you're definitely so right that so many trends about like, the whole female rage thing quickly became kind of cringy and expressing, and it's just women like screaming, and it's because that was like another internet trend book things as well. It's just putting different things together, women being angry and calling it sort of like a separate type of anger. I think that very quickly became something to laugh at as well. Yeah, you're definitely so right. So
yeah, well, and when you think about bookstores, a lot of books by women about the woman's experience are on their own special shelf, like over in the corner. They're over there.
Experience, yeah. Women's studies or something, like women's studies
Yeah.
one little like section of the bookstore.
Yeah, in the back.
Yeah.
By the back door.
Like the gender studies, and it's like the women's studies, and then I don't know, it's just so it's a very but then if a man writes something about like sort of male experience, I don't know, like an American Psycho, it's like this legendary commentary about a extremely interesting character, and he's so complex, and he's like a, I don't know, Byronic hero type of thing, and everyone's obsessed.
Right.
And it's a normal piece of fiction.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily get labeled as man's fiction, but women's fiction has like a separate label.
Label it. There's just fiction and women's fiction. Like I find that categorization of like you're a woman before you are a human very interesting. Like, because there's men, like there's humans, and then there's women, sort of thing. It's very separated, and everything is gendered when it comes to women, for sure. Just a bit, very tricky reality to come to terms with.
And as a creative, it's very common to get labeled a woman writer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's a woman poet. That's a weird statement.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Instead of just a poet that, you know, writes about life. Like I hear what you're saying, like women's experiences kind of get tucked over onto the side thing. Mm-hmm. And like they're separate from like the actual experience or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's its own thing. It has to be a separate, specified. It cannot be a part of the general consensus, because not everybody experiences that, but apparently everybody experiences the male experience and needs to know about it.
Yeah. You mentioned having a feminist mother.
Mm-hmm. I did, yes.
Yeah. So when you think back to your childhood and the way that she raised you, do you think that influenced your writing, your self-expression?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I think she was always very encouraging to do sort of whatever I wanted to do and not be put into any sort of boxes, and believe that I was the best at, you know, whatever I was trying to do. And she's very inspirational in that way. And I think I think she's so inspirational to me because she didn't have that growing up as well. So then she just completely managed to turn it around and ensure that I've got a twin sister. So that me and my twin sister were just so raised and believed that we could do anything. And, you know, so now like we've both done the most like opposite things, because we just do what we love, because that's what, you know, I think any mother should want for their child, is for them to do whatever they think makes them happy. So I think definitely she inspires sort of everything that I do. And of course that comes down to my writing, like you said. There's a lot of empowerment, a lot of honesty. I think she always was a very honest person, and I'm quite an honest person. So I don't like to leave things sort of like in the blanks. I want to leave things up to interpretation, but I portray a lot of, you know, my own feelings and, you know, whatever I'm thinking in it. And I think she's the reason that I do that, probably.
Tell us a little about some of your other projects. I know you have a play in the works and a novel.
Yes, I do. So both of them you could be labeled as what you call this women's fiction, I suppose. I don't write many things from male perspectives. But my play is very new. It's like a one-woman thing that I'm making for my best friend, Estella, and so she's an actress. And I just wanted to put it up somewhere in the next coming months, and it's sort of me just having like an exaltation of my high school experience. It's like embarrassing experiences, it's stupid experiences, but then also the more like sort of heart-wrenching sad ones as well, where you're like, okay, like that was, you know, not something that was so fun. But I'm really liking it so far. It's very much inspired by Fleabag, I would say, which is of course by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's of course one of my major inspirations as a writing woman of today. I just think, I think that I love Fleabag. I love that it was a play first. So I originally started writing it as a TV show, but then I was like, no, this could maybe just be one person on the stage. So she sort of, I watched my friend Estella in her version of A Midsummer's Night Dream. Goodness, can't even speak today. And she did this bit where she was like playing two characters. She went from being like this sort of strange woman to being a lion, and she went like back and forth. Because it's supposed to be two people, but then one of them, the person who was meant to be the lion, dropped out. So she had to become both characters. It was so funny, and I just loved it. I thought it was the best thing ever. So I like went home and started like writing this thing as a as a play instead of a TV show. But I hope that it ends up being good and people come see it. But
so you mentioned that there are a couple of examples, heart-wrenching, embarrassing, and it was the other one sad. Can you tell us one of them, like one of those events that's included in there?
Well, one of like a whole act is encompassed by the experience of my first kiss. So it's like that. So it's very personal.
Is that a sad one, a embarrassing one? Like, what's the label on that one?
I would put it as both. Honestly, it's very embarrassing. There's a whole party situation, and there was a cocktail making contest, and it's a whole fiasco. And then there was won't give too many spoilers, but there was an incident with him going and kissing somebody else, and it's a whole evening. So that's one act play. That's the only act that's like encompassed in one experience. So I would say that one stands out as its own thing. But so that's the play. It's called Lazy Susan. And so it's the main character's name is Susan, and she brings out this Lazy Susan mechanism and brings out each like act on a sort of pamphlet, and she shows it to the audience, and so that's why it's called Lazy Susan. But
nice. Tell us about the novel, because that's quite different.
It's very different. It's less cheerful, I would say. Again, back to the poem, is quite a female rage sort of experiment of mine, I would say. It's loosely based off of the serial killer, Edmund Kemper, and very loosely, I would say, because I sort of humiliate him by transferring him into a woman, which he obviously hates, because that is who he was called, the co-ed killer.
Give us a little background on him.
Yeah. He's still alive, strangely enough. He lives in Vacaville Prison in California, and he's about 6'9", I think. He's a big guy. So they called him Big Ed, was his nickname. And he killed, I believe it was 10 co-eds. So around his mother worked at a college, and he ended by killing his mother, which is kind of something. But he was actually put into a mental institution when he was 15, because he killed both of his grandparents when he was 15 years old. So it sounds like I'm obsessed with murder here, I swear, but I don't know. But so I was because I started writing it when I was 16. So I was inspired by the fact that he was so young, because that was something that I was when I started writing it. So I switched him into being Inyo Clipper, is the name of the character. And it's essentially her life from the age of 14 to 25. It was, it's a full arc of her, a little bit of an insanity journey, I would say. I don't know, for lack of a better calling to it. It's a little manifesto. Yeah.
Is the novel complete, or are you still working on it?
It is complete. I'm just sort of reworking it a little bit at the moment. I'm getting my first few friends to read it and see what they think. So that's the current stage. So I say first sort of drafting stages, and I'll hopefully get it published by next year is the aim. It's called Strawberry Stained Bowl is the book. And my friends sort of ask me why, and I'm not really sure why it's called that. It's just, I think, strawberry, red, all those things. But so that's the novel.
So are you currently a student? I'm wondering how this creative writing fits into your academic world.
Yes, I am currently a student. I'm currently doing a bachelor's actually at the University of Melbourne. So so I'm currently living in Melbourne, and I study creative writing. So that's my major at uni. yeah, so a lot of I'm finally doing a poetry class this semester, which is I don't know. I wouldn't know if I say it's been eye opening. It's the first time I've ever had a chance to sort of workshop poetry with others, which I think is something quite unique that people who don't go to school for creative writing don't often get to experience that sort of connectivity with others with their writing. So that's been really interesting. But yeah, I wrote this poem before that class began. So yeah, that's my uni goals. Yeah, so I want to likely go to the States to study further in the future, either my master's or PhD, whichever I feel the need to go down. We'll see how long I go for. But yeah, so that's my educational background.
You're originally
But
from Kentucky, is that right?
yeah, I'm originally from Kentucky, which people get very confused by here because I sort of they say I'm from the States and I say like, oh, guess which one, and they have no idea because Kentucky isn't on the radar. And there's all the Kentucky Fried Chicken jokes, but I was actually raised in New Zealand because my dad's a New Zealander, so I moved here for uni last year, and yeah, it's a very interesting city. Melbourne is. It's very crowded. I would say it's a bit overpopulated.
If somebody visits Melbourne, what would you suggest they do?
What I should say do? Oh, there's so many things. There's so many lovely places to eat. I would say you have to. There's a Little Italy is one of my favorite places. It's on Lygon Street, and I would also say the State Library, of course. If you all my bookish fiends, you have to go to the State Library. It's beautiful. It's like this big dome like building right in the center of the city, and it's yeah, just so nice. And I would say even to get like a little bit outside of Melbourne and go see a little bit of the like Australian wildlife. It's like right there in the suburbs. You can go to like the northern suburbs and just see some kangaroos in the wild and things like that if you know the right place. So that's what I would probably suggest to anyone who wants to come to Melbourne.
Yeah,
It's a great city.
I would think going out into the outer areas would inspire some interesting short stories for people, for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some very interesting areas on the outskirts. Yeah. But you're in Michigan?
Yes, Lansing, Michigan.
So good. Yes. Can't say I visited.
I've been to Kentucky.
What have you in Lansing?
We have the Capitol here, the state Capitol building. So that's pretty cool. And we have a baseball team. So that's fun.
That's very cool. Very fun. Love that. No, yeah. I do love how small is it? Is it large?
It's kind of a medium city that closes up at night. If you come around at night and there's not a baseball game, there's not a lot going on. It's very quiet,
nice.
which I guess is weird for a city. So
yeah.
It doesn't have that overpopulated feel that you were mentioning.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I say it's only because I live right in the center of the city, like in an apartment. So I'd say that's why it seems so overpopulated. Because the moment I leave my house, it's like the trail of people is right there. And it's like instant. You have to be in it. So I don't know if that's what I'm made for. I might be moving back to the suburbs soon to try and get away from it a little bit. It's a bit too heavy for me. But it's very close to school. So because the school is almost right in the center of the city. So that's another thing to do in Melbourne is go see the campus. It's very beautiful. So sure, but there's so many unis in Melbourne, which is kind of crazy. They're everywhere. So
kind of like New York, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah, very much like New York. Yeah, like I just recently visited New York, and it kind of has almost like a similar feel. I would say.
That makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I'd say it's New York of Australia.
All right. So what are you going to do with the rest of your summer?
It's winter, unfortunately. But
rest of our summer, what will you be doing?
I will be visiting my parents. They live in Townsville, which is a city in the very northmost of Queensland. So Melbourne's right at the bottom of Australia. Townsville's basically right opposite at the top. And it's actually quite warm there. So I technically will have a little bit of summer for my uni break. Yeah, so that'll be nice. And then I'm going to try and finish up these drafts of my book during then and maybe finish the play and hopefully start getting those out into the world is my goal for the summer or the winter, whichever you want to call it. Yeah.
That sounds beautiful. Well,
yeah.
Thanks for joining us today.
you so much for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for stopping by the audio town square of the Washington Square Review. Until next time, this has been the Washington Square On Air from Lansing Community College. To find out more about a writers community and literary journal, visit lcc.edu/WSR. Writing is messy, but do it anyway.